Hey, what is up, mortals? What if Deku was in 1B Season 3 Part 1? Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, so we begin. Monoma headed toward Vlad, who stood by Aizawa in the distance. He already knew that sneaking out would get them in trouble, but in his opinion, it was worth it. On the other hand, Bakugo didn't move. It wasn't that his homeroom teacher looked ready to expel him, but it was because something about Izuku still ticked him off. The greenette had always been filled with what he deemed as unnecessary emotions such as doubt, but it was different now. He had seen what Izuku was like with his real friends, and it reminded him a little of how the boy was before they had to think about quirks. Even so, the small figure in front of the blonde was neither the younger, fragile Izuku he knew nor the unyielding Deku who aspired to be a hero. The one in front of him at the moment was someone who reminded Bakugo of himself, a person who stood tall, looking ahead, all while they were 6 feet under in insecurities. Since the sports festival, Bakugo had mellowed out a lot. He was still feisty as ever, but his anger hardly ever rang out randomly anymore. It kinda pissed him off how it seemed to be the reason he just barely passed the hero licensing exam, but that wasn't the problem at the moment. He stomped up to Izuku, who was walking toward Vlad, and roughly shoved past. Kakin. The blonde didn't respond and instead looked at Toshinori. Talk with him. Doesn't matter how much confidence this shit nerd has. Him not crying isn't normal. He shoved his hands into his pockets before heading toward Aizawa. It was easier when he stupidly muttered everything out loud. Toshinori turned toward his protege. What did he mean, young Midoriya? There was a pause of silence as Izuku didn't speak. It's nothing much. The obvious lie made the retired hero sigh. He had resolved to be the best teacher yet right now. He couldn't get his student to be honest with him. Before, the greenette had nothing to lose and could just say anything at face value, but now the student had a small pride to protect. Toshinori got down to face his student at eye level and spoke gently. Young Midoriya, it's okay to speak your mind. What you're holding back is breaking you down inside, and you shouldn't bottle it up. I know I said that in the face of danger. You must smile, but you're not in danger now. Just please, talk to me, in an understanding tone. Soothing almost, a little begging at the end. The greenette stared up at his understanding mentor, and his knees felt weak. It had always been easier to handle cruelty than kindness. I'm just worried if... He paused again as he looked toward the floor. The greenette had pushed his feelings all the way to the back for the provisional licensing exam, but the pain he bottled up in Kamino came swelling back up. All the feelings were rushing in. The waves of intense emotions that he had tried to control to no avail crashed forward, and the boy fell to the floor. I was worried if I was the one to... Izuku was scared, but he knew that if he wanted the weight off his shoulders, he had to voice his problems. Nothing could be solved if the problem wasn't revealed. Was I the one to end your career? Large tears started to drip down his freckled cheeks, and the mentor paused before sighing. It wasn't that he was angry or disappointed. Far from that. But the only way he could comfort his protege seemed to be telling Izuku the truth too. I hadn't planned to tell you this until much later, but young Midoriya, you were definitely not at fault. The hero wiped a tear as he smiled. As I said before, the fight was inevitable, and well, I thought it would be my end. Young Midoriya, I am predicted to die within the next few years. The greenette paused as the word die settled in. The concept of death brought back a cold pit, and the pit was threatening to swallow his idol. Wait, what? All Might. The mentor gently patted the green curls as he explained how he had been prophesied to die soon. During his fight, Toshinori was genuinely ready to face his predicted gruesome end. But since I'm alive, like I promised your mother, I will dedicate my life to raising you. It was hard to accept as the greenette still blamed himself, but it felt like his insecurities had finally been lifted. The sense of relief only caused more tears to spill out, and Toshinori sighed again before crouching down. He smiled at his student, who finally opened up to him again and hugged the crying child. The eventful night was definitely exhausting as Izuku got up and wobbled toward Monoma. Vlad already explained that all 3 children were going to receive extra training as punishment for sneaking out. Aizawa took Bakugo away, who glanced at his childhood friend. The blonde would never admit that he was starting to care for Izuku, but even if he did, it was not his place to stand by the greenette's side. A huff escaped his lips as he returned to the wanted dorms. Bakugo turned his back to the greenette. He was a major part of Izuku's past, but going ahead, his place was somewhere else. Izuku and Monoma returned to the 1B dorms, and the greenette was surprised to see that the rest of the class were still up and sat in the common room. Guys, it's past midnight. You look like you've been crying, and the first thing you do is ask us if we're okay. Away sighed as he got up from the sofa where Izuku had sat before. He returned to stand behind, and the greenette took the invitation and sat down. Monoma joined Tetsu and Shizaki on the floor, and Takage smiled at the boy who sat next to her. He's right, you know. Monoma sighed and everyone started to speak. Of course we're still up. How could we when your presence felt disturbed? The heavens show that friends care for each other. Shizaki's right. We care for you, man. A friendship goes two ways, doesn't it? The class agreed and a weak smile pulled itself into Izuku's lips. He would forever be grateful for the kind people in his life. Since it was late and the problem was resolved, everyone started to make their way to bed. Takage, however, decided to walk the greenette to his room first. They didn't speak as they stood by his door when Takage turned toward the greenette. She hadn't spoken earlier and she wanted to put at least a word of encouragement in. Deku, it's perfectly fine to cry, okay? Izuku looked at the girl who seemed to always be there whenever he felt down. Her words weren't hers alone as they carried the kindness from everyone, the care from Toshinori, the class, and herself. It's okay to cry. And it's okay to complain about anything. She held up her arms and smiled. It's okay to lean on us, you know. Izuku smiled at the sight of the familiar toothy grin and accepted the hug. No more words were exchanged as he silently thanked her. He thanked Takage, the class, and just everyone. It was the last day of the summer break, so when Izuku closed his exhausted eyes, he promised himself that he would start again. The morning would be where everything starts anew. He was glad to be part of 1B, feeling fresh as morning dew. Izuku woke up and got ready for the day. The secret insecurities that he carried were now shared and they no longer burdened him alone. He was ready for anything life threw at him. Nothing could bring him down. That was until he found himself on the floor. Though, the class got up slowly, rubbing their bodies as they did. Each of them had received a heavy punch somewhere and stared at the laughing third year who was trying to get dressed. It was Mirio Tagata, the current top student of UA, even though they had seen one clatter out of the hall earlier that morning. 1B wasn't ready. Everything made sense as Mirio explained the point of the one-sided fight, which was a show explaining everyone had the potential to grow. It hurt, but the pain was ignored as the students got excited about the concept of work studies. Mirio liked the class. They had taken the initiative. That one walked out holding their stomachs and fought him knowing he aimed there. It was why they lay on the floor clutching other parts of themselves. The ones who stood to him specifically were Izuku, Monoma, and Kaibara. The three analytical students had noticed the way he fought and were the three to react. Monoma hadn't copied anyone's quirk, so all he could do was manage to turn around at the approaching Mirio. Kaibara was able to do more by trying to spin away, but Izuku did the most by trying to fight back. Either way, the whole class showed potential and were excited to start their work studies. At first, Izuku asked Gran Torino if he was accepting students. However, the old hero was caught up working in a certain case and was too busy to take him in. Can't All Might introduce you to some people? Like, the emerald eyes widened as Gran Torino dropped a familiar name. His old sidekick, Night Eye, as the hero side of society was rushing ahead to prepare students for their future. A certain leader angrily sat in an abandoned warehouse. He had just met with a young Yakuza leader of the Shy Hasekai and it cost the life of a subordinate. His vanguard action squad was now down 6 members as Muscular, Moonfish, Mustard, Dabai, and Magni were locked up with his master in Tartarus. His deadly red eyes glared at the remains of Spinner and he exhaled slowly. Shigaraki wanted revenge. Time passed and students solidified the places they would go. Izuku had a rough time as All Might refused to help with the introduction to Sir Night-Eye, but the Greenette managed to convince Mirio. The third year was currently under the ex-sidekick's wing and Izuku was able to get the recommendation. After the torrent of troubles, the Greenette found himself exhausted on Sir Night-Eye's office floor. I'll take you on. It had been hectic, but everything worked out. By the time his first day of work study was upon him, Izuku was ready. Today we'll be doing patrol and surveillance. We'll split into 2 groups. Surveillance. Izuku was a little put off by the word and Bubble Girl, a sidekick, explained how the Night-Eye agency was currently working on a secret investigation. An explanation later. Deku and Lemillion started to patrol the streets and a couple of people recognized the Greenette as the boy who placed second on TV. Izuku smiled before waving at them. You're not as nervous as I thought you'd be, Mirio pointed out and the younger boy smiled. Well, this is technically my 3rd patrol. Even if my first was uneventful, my second had a lot. I'm pretty sure waving is a lot easier than what happened in Camino Ward. Mirio whistled before laughing. He had seen the news when the incident happened, but it was his policy to be optimistic and always laugh. Then you have a lot of experience to grow from. Keep it up. The Greenette returned the laugh as his senior gave him the thumbs up. I will. Not a scream. More like an oof. Sound made from a gentle crash into someone. Like an exhale of breath. Izuku turned to see a child fall to the floor after crashing into him. Sorry, that must have hurt. Lifting a hand to help her. The Greenette's eyes narrowed slightly as she flinched at the movement. Instead, He let his palms face upward and gently lifted the girl to her feet. She's trembling. No, you can't be causing trouble for the heroes. The tension-filled air weighed down heavily on Izuku as he looked up. There in front of them was Overhaul, the young leader of the Shy Hasekai. These two are great. The Dragoon hero, Ryukyu, praised her future sidekick Neji Hato. The girl was the second strongest of UA and had recommended two 1B girls. Ryuko Inagi bowed her appreciation and Yui Kodai nodded. Both girls were rather quiet and would prefer to work with someone who didn't mind that. Luckily for them, Neji had taken a liking to them and recommended the two best friends. Their quirks were compatible together and the pro hero acknowledged it as she talked out loud. I think you two are ready for that matter. She glanced at the silent girls and smiled. Okay, I'll accept the team-up request from All Might's former sidekick. Night Eye, are you going to your work study too? It had been a day since Izuku's encounter with Overhaul. Their sudden cross of paths was tense, but before anything had broken out, the little girl had returned to the Yakuza's side. Overhaul claimed that the girl called Eri was his daughter, but both students knew it was a lie. They managed to fool the young leader into thinking they weren't tracking him and immediately reported to Sir Night-Eye. Hiraijiro Kirishima, right? Yes. Are you heading this way too? Izuku smiled at the boy from Wano who walked up to them and he nodded. It was a little packed in the train, but he could still see Yanagi and Kodai sitting together nearby, listening to music. The two boys chatted happily about their experiences, and Izuku praised the redhead for making the news the day before. You saw it too? Yes, Red Riot's debut. They continued to chit-chat about the strange coincidence of their destination. Kirishima was supposed to be going to Kansai and the girls to other places, yet here they were. You two are the ones with pro hero Ryukyu, right? The two didn't answer Kirishima and the redhead looked at Izuku for help. The greenette only smiled awkwardly and shrugged. The two girls had always been quiet, but that was fine with him. He knew that at the end of the day, they were kind friends despite the cold exterior. I'm pretty sure I heard Sue get the offer too, but she declined. The greenette tilted his head slightly in interest and Kirishima spilled his class's gossip. Apparently, Tsuyu Asui was also someone Neji liked and wanted to recommend, but she had declined the offer. She was going to a different agency with her best friend Achako Uraraka, who had just been different since Ada's funeral. Apparently Uraraka's parents had gone as far as bringing up the idea to drop out of UA. She has refused, however, claiming that she needed to be stronger so that she can save more people. Is everyone okay after that? Izuku was worried for Wana, but Kirishima smiled. His sharp teeth reminded the greenette of a certain someone and he found himself smiling too. We're fine. Everyone's okay. Although it is a little weird without his robotic arms swinging at us with rules each morning. He awkwardly laughed as their train ride came to an end. Wait, we have the same stop. Whoa, coincidence. Same direction. We're even going around the same corner. The big three. Izuku's eyes widened as he saw UAS top students before them. What's going on? Although there were complications with a hero called Rocklock complaining about the students present, everyone was soon seated, and by everyone, the greenette meant everyone, from Gran Torino to the Wana homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa, to the heroes that were taking the work studies like Fat Gum and Ryukyu. There were so many gathered with a range that Izuku had never seen, but all was pushed into the back burner. That was because the Hasekai was suspected to be the main source of an illegal drug, a drug that destroyed quirks, even though the drug itself was horrifying. What made the greenette sick to the stomach was how the drug was made. The contents were human blood and cells, even if no one else knew. Mirio and Izuku came to a simultaneous revolting conclusion. And oh, how those two felt rage. The plan was immediately in motion. If Overhaul was using his own daughter's body to make quirk erasing bullets, Mirio and Izuku, who were so close to saving her, were determined to protect her until the day of the attack. The students were on standby. They were forbidden to say anything. It was frustrating as the greenette couldn't even ask All Might about anything to do with Sir Night-Eye with the restriction. As he sat down with his katsuden, Izuku would only sigh under the pressure. You're not going to eat, huh? Monoma's voice dragged him back into reality, and the greenette smiled awkwardly. I'm eating. He quickly dug into his food and Kiwaro glanced over. Something is stirring. Takage looked up from her dinosaur nuggets and raised an eyebrow. Are you okay, Deku? He's been looking gloomy since his work study. Izuku nervously gulped as he smiled at his friends. Really? Well, Monoma noticed the clenched fist as he was the one sitting next to Izuku and sighed. Well, nothing. If you can't talk about it now, we'll just do as we always do. Yeah, we can wait. His best friends both smiled at him and Izuku's tense smile dissolved into a more relaxed one. Yeah, okay. I can promise that. We'll talk when it's all over. Takage immediately went back to wolfing down her nuggets and Izuku chuckled. Monoma shrugged before eating his own lunch. For someone who loves dinosaurs, isn't it controversial to love to eat them? It was a meaningless fight that occurred anyway as the offended Greenette went into a passionate rant about dinosaurs and her love for chicken nuggets. And as a conclusion, Dino Nuggets are a godsend. Hell yeah. Tetsu cheered as Takage took a little bow and Izuku laughed. It was great to just let random events fill his mind, and he was grateful for the cheery atmosphere, although it upset him greatly knowing that somewhere in the world, a young girl was probably being cut open. His mind was now clear. He was going to use the uneasy feelings as fuel so he would be ready for his standby period to end. When that day came, Izuku planned to bring Eri here, a place where worries just melt away. 2 days. It was night when the students got the message, and Izuku gripped the phone as he ran out of his dorm. The Greenette looked at the 2 girls who had also run out of their rooms and nodded at them. They nodded back. That meant when morning came, the operation would begin. Takage and Monoma didn't say a word as they noticed the obvious change in their friend. He had suddenly changed from his gloomy state and into a serious one who stared at his fish breakfast too long and intensely for it to be normal. Instead, they just waved him off with a smile and made him promise to spill everything the next day. You're energetic. Tamaki Amajiki was cowering a little as Kirishima hyped himself up. Kodai tapped her pockets and made sure there was a large assortment of bolts, screws, and sheets of metal inside as Yanagi stood close to her. It was 8:23 and they were to move out at 1:30. Time was upon them. I'm counting on everyone to move swiftly. The policeman then readied to ring the doorbell when, bam, the wooden gate violently burst open and Izuku jumped to grab the flying officer. Are you all right? The policeman nodded and his partner came to make sure as the Greenette turned back around. Eraserhead immediately faced the towering Hulk who moved surprisingly fast for his size. What do you want? Literally just watch the first 0:45 seconds of the video. You'll understand. The giant yawned before reeling back a massive fist. Brace yourselves. Why are you people here? An intense wave of dust erupted from the entrance and everyone looked up to see Ryukyu as an actual dragon, holding the attacker back. The rest of you, go. Kodai took out a handful of bolts and tossed them. Yanagi floated the light objects strategically along the Yakuza as the pro flapped her wings, lifting herself off. Increase. Kodai immediately changed each bolt to about the size of a lorry each and the pro hero sat on top of the pile. Good. He's unconscious. The quiet girl then walked up to a nearby lamppost and shrunk it down, pulling it out of the ground at the size of a toothpick, doing the same to a few others. Yanagi floated them into a place as they returned to their original size, with a small plate of steel Kodai carried to cover the top with more enlarged bolts weighing it down. Their pro hero praised the duo. Nice thinking, girls. Now he's caught. Police, watch him, with everything wrapped up there. The 3 immediately headed into the premises after the other heroes. One for all full cowling. Red, drill style, divided by gauntlet. The 2 students broke down a wall that was in their way and immediately ran forward. The pros were quick too but had to stop as a roar came echoing down. The floor drunkenly swayed and nobody could hold their footing as everything started to distort. The path is rolling. It's changing. As long as I know the direction, we can go. Lemillion ran ahead down the shaking corridor and permeated through the walls. As for the others, the floor opened beneath and swallowed them below. They were immediately faced by 3 Yakuza members who seemed to mean business, but Tamaki held up a hand. Save the strength of the pros for the goal. The UA kitten, as Nejire called him, was yelling as loud as a lion and Fat Gum immediately ran off. I'll leave it to you then. The rest immediately followed and headed down the corridor, beelining it toward Eri. Eraser. A wall immediately crashed into the underground hero but Fat Gum pushed the man away. Kirishima. Izuku looked around and noticed that the redhead had disappeared too before shaking his head. No, he's fine. I need to save Eri. They ran ahead and more walls started to frantically move again. Each staggering slab of concrete threatened to take their feeble lives as the undulating floor violently lunged around. Nobody even had the chance to catch their breaths when, silence. Everything stopped moving. Look out. 2 walls suddenly burst upward and Izuku looked around in a panic. He was alone. Can anyone hear me? Be on alert. The pros had been sectioned off into one part as Izuku stood in another. Rocklock was alone too, and the reason was probably because the 2 of them were how they moved ahead in the reeling corridor. I'm kicking this down. The wall was burst open and Izuku saw the pro hero smile in relief at him. A fake jumped out at me. I took care of it though. Are you okay, Midoriya? The Greenette nodded but felt a little uneasy. Did I tell him my name? He glanced at the body whose side was sliced open. Knife wound. He looked back at the smiling pro hero who previously completely ignored his existence. He's not taking a battle stance to face the pro hero. Izuku glared at the man. Who are you? Thank you all for sticking around and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We The Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description. So feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video. So goodbye and have a divine day.